Raven Black trusted Detective Carlos Martinez with her life until she discovered he was the crime boss using his badge to cover million-dollar heists and murders. The partnership had started 6 months ago when Detective Carlos Martinez reached out to Raven Black's private investigation firm. The seasoned police officer with salt and pepper hair and kind brown eyes claimed he needed help with cases that required discretion and expertise outside official channels. Raven's emerald green eyes had been immediately impressed by Martinez's dedication. Unlike other cops who viewed private investigators as competition, Carlos treated her as a valuable partner. He shared case files, offered police resources, and seemed genuinely committed to justice. "You're one of the good ones, Raven," he would often say after they successfully closed a case. "This city needs more people like you who actually care about protecting innocent people." Their collaboration had been remarkably successful. In 6 months, they had solved 12 major cases: armed robberies, burglaries, even a kidnapping. Martinez always seemed to have the perfect leads, the right witnesses, and access to evidence that moved investigations forward with unusual speed. What Raven didn't realize was that she was being played by a master manipulator who had turned crime solving into the perfect cover for crime committing. The first crack in Carlos's facade appeared during the Westfield Bank case. The robbery had been sophisticated. Professional criminals who knew exactly where security cameras were located, which guards would be on duty, and how to bypass alarm systems. The heist netted $2.3 million and left no physical evidence. Inside job, Martinez concluded immediately. Had to be someone with access to bank blueprints and security schedules. Raven's investigation focused on current and former bank employees, but something felt wrong. The thieves had known details that even most employees wouldn't have access to, like the specific timing of armored car deliveries and the location of backup security servers. "Carlos," Raven said during one of their strategy meetings, "what if the inside person isn't a bank employee? What if it's someone with law enforcement access to security consultations?" Martinez's reaction was subtle but telling. For just a moment, his friendly demeanor flickered, replaced by something colder and more calculating. "That's an interesting theory, but we should focus on more likely suspects," he said, quickly steering the conversation away from police involvement. The pattern became clear when Raven started tracking the cases independently. Using her own contacts and resources, Raven began investigating their solved cases from a different angle. What she discovered made her blood run cold. Every major crime they had solved together had one thing in common: the real perpetrators were never caught. Instead, convenient scapegoats were arrested, usually small-time criminals with existing records who could be easily framed for larger crimes. The Westfield Bank robbery was blamed on Tommy Rodriguez, a petty thief who had been in jail during the actual heist but was somehow linked to the crime through evidence that appeared after Martinez took over the investigation. The Pemberton jewelry store burglary was pinned on Maria Santos, a drug addict who had never stolen anything more valuable than grocery store merchandise, but was found with a diamond necklace that proved her involvement in a million-dollar heist. "Someone is using our investigations to cover their tracks," Raven whispered to herself as she studied the pattern. "Every case we solve protects the real criminals." The truth hit her like a physical blow during the Morrison kidnapping case. 8-year-old Emma Morrison had been taken from her family's estate with a ransom demand of $5 million. Martinez had called Raven immediately, claiming they needed to work together to find the child before the kidnappers escalated to violence. The investigation moved with Martinez's usual efficiency. Within 48 hours, they had traced the kidnapping to a supposedly desperate gambling addict who needed money to pay off debts. The man was arrested, Emma was rescued, and the case was closed. But Raven's instincts were screaming that something was wrong. The kidnapper's confession had been too neat, his story too convenient. Most troubling, Emma Morrison seemed terrified of the police officers who were supposed to be her rescuers. Conducting her own follow-up investigation, Raven discovered that the kidnapper had been in the hospital with a documented medical emergency during the time Emma was taken. The man had been coerced into confessing to a crime he couldn't have committed. More disturbing, Emma's father had quietly paid a $5 million consulting fee to Martinez's security firm just days before his daughter's kidnapping. Money that was supposedly for family protection, but had actually funded his daughter's abduction by the very people he had hired to protect her. The scope of Martinez's criminal enterprise was staggering. Carlos Martinez wasn't just a corrupt cop taking bribes. He was running a sophisticated criminal organization that used police resources and authority to plan and execute major crimes. His badge gave him access to security systems, witness protection programs, evidence storage, and law enforcement databases. The operation worked perfectly. Martinez's crew would commit crimes, then Martinez would take over the investigations, manipulate evidence to frame innocent people and ensure the real criminals remained protected. He was simultaneously the police officer solving crimes and the crime boss committing them. Raven's partnership with Martinez hadn't been about solving crimes. It had been about giving his cover-ups credibility. Her reputation as an honest private investigator made the framed suspects more believable and the closed cases less suspicious. "I've been helping him destroy innocent people's lives," Raven realized with growing horror. The confrontation that followed nearly cost Raven her life. When Raven tried to gather evidence against Martinez, she discovered that her own office and phone had been under surveillance for months. Carlos knew about her investigation before she had even confirmed her suspicions. "You've been a valuable partner, Raven," Martinez said when he arrived at her office late one evening, his familiar smile now looking predatory. "It's unfortunate that you couldn't leave well enough alone." "How many innocent people have you destroyed?" Raven demanded, her green eyes blazing with anger and betrayal. "Innocent?" Carlos laughed. "Tommy Rodriguez was dealing drugs to kids. Maria Santos was stealing from elderly people. They may not have committed the specific crimes we blamed them for, but they weren't innocent." "And Emma Morrison? What was her crime?" "Her father was laundering money for drug cartels," Martinez replied coldly. "The kidnapping taught him the value of proper security services. Now he pays us regularly to ensure his family's safety." The revelation that Martinez was essentially running a protection racket using kidnapping as leverage made Raven realize she was dealing with a sociopath who viewed his badge as the perfect weapon for terrorizing and controlling people. "You used me," Raven said, her voice filled with disgust. "You made me complicit in destroying innocent lives." "You helped bring justice to people who deserved it," Martinez corrected. The methods were unconventional, but the results were appropriate. When Martinez reached for his service weapon, Raven realized that her investigation had identified her as a threat that needed to be eliminated. The corrupt detective was preparing to add her murder to his list of crimes covered up by his badge. The takedown required Raven to outsmart a master manipulator who controlled evidence and had law enforcement connections. Fortunately, Raven had been recording their conversation and had already transmitted copies of her evidence to federal authorities outside Martinez's sphere of influence. The FBI had been building their own case against police corruption in the city, and Raven's evidence provided the missing pieces they needed. The arrest of Detective Carlos Martinez revealed a criminal enterprise that had operated for over 5 years, committed dozens of major crimes, and destroyed the lives of more than 30 innocent people who had been framed for crimes they didn't commit. The financial scope was staggering. Martinez's organization had stolen over $50 million through robberies, kidnappings, and extortion schemes, all protected by his law enforcement authority and covered up through manipulated investigations. The aftermath revealed the true cost of corruption disguised as justice. Every case Raven had worked with Martinez had to be reopened and investigated by federal authorities. The innocent people who had been framed required legal exoneration, financial compensation, and years of effort to rebuild their destroyed reputations. Emma Morrison required extensive therapy to recover from being kidnapped by the same people her family had trusted to protect her. Her father's cooperation with federal investigators helped expose the broader network of businesses being terrorized by Martinez's protection racket. Raven Black, the emerald-eyed private investigator who had dedicated her career to seeking truth and justice, learned that sometimes the greatest criminals are the ones who hide behind badges and manipulate the very system designed to protect innocent people. The case changed Raven's approach to law enforcement partnerships forever. She had trusted a corrupt officer with her life and nearly become another victim of his elaborate criminal empire disguised as police work. Raven Black's discovery of Detective Martinez's criminal empire reminds us that corruption becomes most dangerous when it hides behind authority and trust. Her story shows us that the most sophisticated criminals are often the ones we never suspect because they wear badges and claim to serve justice. If Raven Black's police corruption investigation shocked you, subscribe to The Dark Truth for more cases of betrayal and institutional corruption. Hit like if you believe no one should be above the law regardless of their badge. Tell us in the comments. How can citizens protect themselves when the people sworn to serve and protect become the predators? Share Raven's story with someone who needs to remember that true justice requires constant vigilance. Until next time, remember that the most dangerous criminals are often the ones who convince us they're the heroes.